Good morning, students. In our today's session, we are going to take up the beautiful poem which is called The Unfolding Bud. It is written by Naoshi Koriyama. Now, I suppose you have your book with you with the page 36 open and some pencil to write down the word meanings. Now, children, as always, so let us first enjoy the poem, the beautiful poem written by this poet. A very, very simple and a very short poem, as you can see. And you can see flowers along, so that means this poem is based on flowers. Yes, of course, you're right. So let us begin with the reading first. One is amazed by a water lily unfolding with each passing day, taking on a richer color and new dimensions. One is not amazed at the first glance by a poem which is as tight closed as a tiny bud. Yet one is surprised to see the poem gradually unfolding, revealing its rich inner self as one reads it again and over again. So, what have you understood from this? Now, you must be wondering that ma'am has just read the poem once and she hasn't explained anything, and we haven't even read it twice. So, why is ma'am asking, what have you understood? Of course, we just took one reading and we don't know what the poem is about. We've just got a vague idea that the poem is about water lily, and then the poet is also talking about poems in between in the second paragraph, and reading the poem over in it. Yes, that is what actually the poem is about. Through this poem, the poet actually wants to convey that we can understand a poem by reading it over and over again, and this he explains through a very beautiful comparison. He's comparing the poem, the process of understanding of the poem with the process of the unfolding or the blooming of a water lily flower. So let me summarize you this poem, what the poet actually wants to say. Now, this is a very, very simple and amazingly beautiful poem with a deep meaning. Now, the surprising comparison made by the poet between a blooming water lily and the process of understanding of a poem. It charms us. The poet says, we are mesmerized when we see a water lily unfolding itself. The first glance of the tightly closed bud may not get our attention, but we are filled with wonder when we see it opening and changing its color and size with each passing day. We are filled with wonder to see its inner beauty when we watch it over and over again. The same way, the poet says that the first reading of the poem may not amaze us, as we may just get the surface meaning of the poem. The poet compares the first reading of the poem to the tightly closed bud. But when we read it over and over again, we are able to get the deeper or the real meaning, just like the unfolding of the lily. So, like a bud, no, we don't get too much to see in the bud, but when we see it growing up, opening, we see its petals spreading, the color expressing it more brightly, the inner parts unfolding, so we are able to enjoy it. So same way, just one glance of a flower, we are not able to enjoy it that way. So when we see it opening, when we see it when we see it over and over again, we are able to enjoy the real beauty of the flower. And same way, the poem also. When we just take one reading of the poem, we may not get the real meaning. We may just get the words, the what the words are written, no? But when we read it second time, third time, and try to understand what the poem is saying or what the poet wants to say, then exactly we get the real and the deep meaning, or then only exactly we can enjoy the poem. So this is what the poem is about, the summary of the poem. Now, let us start with the line by line explanation. The first paragraph we'll start with. The first line says, "One is amazed." You know what is amazed? Please write down. Beautifully surprised. Amazed means beautifully surprised. So one is amazed by a water lily. So when we see a water lily, we are charmed, we are mesmerized to see a water lily, the beautiful flower, unfolding with each passing day. So, when we see that flower growing from a bud into a mature, beautiful flower, when we see it turning from a bud, and with each passing day turning into a beautiful flower, we are amazed, taking on a richer color and new dimensions. And each day when we watch it, we see it changing colors. Earlier it appears lighter, but when it grows, when the petals open, they appear more bright, and the size also becomes from a small bud into a big grown up flower. So we are beautifully amazed when we see a water lily unfolding with each passing day. With each passing day means slowly and gradually. One is not amazed at a first glance. And now in the second paragraph, the poet says that we are not amazed, we are not charmed at the first glance. Glance means a short look. So we are not amazed when we see for the first time, or we just buy a poem which is as tight closed as a tiny bud. So here in the second paragraph, the poet says, when we see the poem for a first time, or when we just read it for the first time, we will not be amazed at just by the first reading, because the first reading will be just like a closed tiny bud, because the first reading of the poem will just give us that much view, as we can see like a tiny closed bud, tight closed bud. Then we come to the third paragraph. Yet one is surprised. So he says, in the first reading, we may not be amazed to read the poem. We may not understand, because we will not understand the real meaning which the poem wants to convey. But again, when we read it the second time, the third time, we will be surprised. So he says, yet one is surprised to see the poem. Now, when we read it for the first time, we will not be surprised, or will not be enjoying that poem. But the same poem, when we read it for the second time, we will be surprised. Now, why are we surprised to read the poem for the second time? Because when we read it for the second time or the third time, gradually, slowly and gradually, we try to understand it. We get to know the meaning behind the poem. So, yet one is surprised to see the poem gradually unfolding, like the water lily unfolds. So when we read it for the second time or the third time, the poem will be unfolding itself. And what will be unfolding? The meaning. The meaning will unfold. We will be able to see the deeper meaning of the poem. So, yet one is surprised to see the poem gradually unfolding. So, gradually, slowly and gradually, when we read it for the second or the third time, we will be surprised to read the poem, revealing its rich inner self. So when we'll read it for the second or third time or the multiple readings, what will we reveal? We will see, the poem will show its rich inner self. The deeper meaning of the poem will come to know as one reads it again and over again. So when we will read it again and again, we will be able to understand the inner meaning of the poem, and the poem will gradually unfold itself just like a blooming water lily. So, don't you think so? It was a wonderful poem, and the best part of the poem is that how, through a simple comparison, the poet has expressed a deep meaning. He's compared the understanding of the poem by reading it so many times, the unfolding of the meaning of the poem, with a water lily. As the water lily, the bud of the water lily, it unfolds gradually, slowly, day by day, and we watch it and we start enjoying it. Same way, when we start reading the poem again and again, we will be able to understand. So next time when in your exams you get any kind of poem comprehensions, you get scared of the poem comprehensions, don't you? But so you adopt this method, read it once, read it twice, thrice, and gradually feel, you'll be able to connect to the poet, what the poet wants to convey. So, thank you. This is enough for the day. Just read it